Can you picture hearing something like that? Those were the final words my father ever spoke to me before he pushed me out into an October downpour and bolted the door behind me. Leave my house, I don't want a broken daughter. I was 15 years old. I had no jacket, no phone, no cash, just a school backpack stuffed with algebra worksheets while rain soaked straight through my worn-out sneakers. 3 hours later, the police called him, and the moment he heard what they told him, all the color drained from his face. But by then, nothing could be undone. My name is Myra Cole. I'm 28 now, sitting alone in my apartment in Boston, watching rain crawl slowly down the glass. A letter lies on my kitchen table, written in unsteady handwriting on cheap nursing home paper. After 13 years of complete silence, my father wants to see me again. He says he's dying. He says he's sorry. Funny how rain does that. It always drags me back to that night. October 14th, 2011. I remember coming home from school as if it were any ordinary Tuesday. Backpack slung over one shoulder, mind still replaying the algebra test I'd nailed earlier that day. I was thinking about dinner, unfinished homework, and a band poster I planned to buy with my birthday money. Normal 15-year-old thoughts. I had no clue that in less than 2 hours, I'd be walking alone through a freezing storm, unsure if I'd even make it through the night. The second I stepped inside the house, I felt it. Something was wrong. My father, Victor Cole, stood in the living room like a bomb ready to explode. His face was flushed deep red, his hands trembling. In one fist he gripped a stack of cash, in the other several empty pill bottles. Behind him stood my sister, Elise. She was 19, 4 years older than me, and her face was carefully arranged into concern, worry, heartbreak. She looked exactly like the loving older sister who had just uncovered a terrible secret about her younger sibling. But I saw her eyes. I caught the brief flash she failed to hide. Satisfaction. Our stepmother, Marla, lingered silently in the kitchen doorway, arms folded, lips tight, watching everything while saying absolutely nothing. That was her true talent, remaining quiet while damage was being done. My father didn't even allow me to set my backpack down. He started shouting as if I'd burned the house to the ground. He accused me of stealing money from his wallet for months, said I'd been using it to buy pills and hiding them in my bedroom. He claimed Elise had uncovered everything, cash shoved into my dresser drawers, pill bottles tucked away in my closet, text messages that supposedly proved I was communicating with drug dealers. I tried to speak. I tried to tell him I'd never taken a single dollar from his wallet, that I'd never seen those pills in my life, that I had no idea what he was talking about. But the words stuck in my throat when I realized something terrifying. He wasn't listening. His decision had already been made. Elise had spent the entire day working on him, planting lies gently, carefully, coating them in concern so they'd go down easy. She stood there pretending to be devastated, telling him she'd done everything she could to help me, that she'd begged me to stop, that she hadn't wanted to say anything, but she couldn't sit back and watch her little sister ruin her life. It was flawless, an award-worthy performance, and my father absorbed every word as if it were sacred truth. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in hard enough to leave bruises, and dragged me toward the front door. My backpack lay where I'd dropped it earlier. He snatched it up and hurled it into my chest so forcefully that I stumbled backward. Then he opened the door. Rain was already pouring down in heavy sheets. Thunder echoed somewhere far away. The temperature had dropped nearly 15 degrees since morning. He stared straight into my eyes and repeated the words. "Get out of my house, I don't need a sick daughter." He shoved me onto the porch. The door slammed shut. The deadbolt snapped into place. And just like that, at 15 years old, I had no home. I stood there for about 5 minutes, completely motionless, not even because of the cold, though it was coming, but because my mind couldn't catch up with what had just happened. I kept waiting for the door to open again, waiting for someone to say it was all a mistake. No one came. My phone was still sitting on my desk in my bedroom. I wasn't allowed to take anything except what I already had in my hands. Inside my backpack were a few textbooks, a half-eaten granola bar, and absolutely nothing that could help me survive a night outside. No jacket. No money. No way to call for help. It was 2011. Payphones technically still existed somewhere, but who even carried change? Certainly not a 15-year-old who spent her allowance on banned posters. Priorities right. Straight-A student, zero survival skills. So I started walking. I didn't consciously decide where to go. My body just moved on its own, heading toward the only place that had ever felt safe. My grandmother Evelyn's house, 7 miles away. She was my mother's mother, the one person who had always looked at me like I mattered. 7 miles doesn't sound far when you're in a car, but when you're walking through icy rain in thin canvas sneakers with no coat, it might as well be 700. Route 9 stretched out in front of me, dark, shiny with rain. Cars rushed past, splashing water onto the roadside without slowing down. I was nothing more than a shadow along the pavement, a shape people didn't want to look at for too long. After the first mile, my clothes were soaked all the way through, clinging to my skin. After the second mile, my fingers went completely numb. By the third mile, my teeth were chattering so violently I thought they might shatter. Still, I kept moving. What other choice did I have? Turn around and beg my father to believe me. His verdict had already been passed. There was nowhere left to go except forward, one frozen, unsteady step at a time. The dangerous thing about hypothermia is that you don't realize it's happening until you're already in trouble. Your body begins to shut down piece by piece. Your thoughts grow hazy. And suddenly, sitting down just for a minute feels like the smartest idea you've ever had. Just a short rest. Just long enough to breathe. I made it 4 miles before my legs finally failed me. There was a mailbox ahead. I remember thinking I'd lean against it for a moment, catch my breath, then keep going. Grandma Evelyn's house was only 3 miles away. I could still make it. But my knees gave out before I reached it. The gravel rushed up toward me. And then everything went black. 3 hours after he threw his daughter into a storm, my father's phone rang. The voice on the other end was calm, detached, professional. "Officer Reynolds, County Police," the man said. "There's been an incident." His daughter had been found unconscious along Route 9. Hypothermia. She was being rushed to County General Hospital. "And one more thing, sir," the officer added. "Child Protective Services has been notified. A caseworker is already on site. We'll need to ask why a 15-year-old girl was walking alone in a dangerous storm without a coat or a phone. We're going to need you to come to the hospital," he finished, "and bring whatever evidence you have." My father's face went pale as bone. I know because hospital staff told me later. They said he looked like a man watching his entire life collapse in slow motion. Elise was standing right beside him when the call came in. And for the first time her flawless mask slipped, just for a fraction of a second. But it was enough. Because here's the part that changed everything. The woman who found me lying unconscious on that roadside wasn't just some random driver passing through. Her name was Margaret Lewis, and she had spent 35 years working in Child Protective Services. She had seen every form of abuse, every kind of neglect, every excuse parents used to justify abandoning their children. She knew exactly what she was looking at when she found a teenage girl in the freezing rain, with no coat, no phone, and no one searching for her. And she had no intention of letting it go. My father believed he was eliminating a problem that night, thought he was cutting out the bad apple, thought he was protecting his family from a daughter he'd already decided was broken. What he actually did was light a fuse, and he had no idea what was about to explode. To really understand what happened that night, why my sister did what she did, I need to take you back to where everything first began to unravel. My mother, Lillian Cole, died in 2006. Cancer. I was 10 years old. Elise was 14. One day, we had a mom who flipped pancakes on Sunday mornings and braided my hair for school photos. The next day, we were standing beside a hospital bed, watching machines beep slower and slower until they stopped completely. My father didn't cope well. That's putting it gently. He collapsed inward like a star burning out. He still went to work, still came home, but that was it. He'd sit in his recliner, staring at nothing, unmoving, The house could have caught fire around him, and I'm not sure he would have noticed. So Elise stepped in. At 14 years old, she became the one who cooked dinner, signed permission slips, and made sure I got to school on time. She became the responsible one, the mature one, the daughter my father leaned on. And he praised her endlessly for it. "What would I do without you, Elise? You're so grown up for your age. You're holding this family together." I don't think he ever once asked how she was coping with our mother's death. He just expected her to handle everything else. My father had 2 major blind spots in life, his oldest daughter and his favorite recliner. Both were worn thin, breaking at the seams, badly in need of replacement, but he refused to see it. And what no one noticed, what my father absolutely refused to see, was what happened when he wasn't watching. Elise wasn't just stepping up. She was building a kingdom. And in that kingdom, I was the peasant who needed to know her place. It started small. Homework that vanished the night before it was due. Field trip permission slips that somehow never reached my teachers. My favorite shirt shrinking in the wash. Then another. Then another. Oops, must have been a mistake. Birthday invitations I mailed that my friends never received. Messages from classmates that mysteriously disappeared. A reputation being constructed piece by piece, without me even realizing it. She'd approach my teachers wearing that same sad, concerned expression and explain that I was struggling after our mother's death, that I was acting out at home, that they should be patient with me because I was going through such a difficult time. She created the image of a troubled child. And everyone believed her because she was so mature, so responsible, so caring. I tried to tell my father once. I sat him down and told him Elise was sabotaging me, that she was lying about me, that something was seriously wrong. He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "You're just jealous of your sister," he said. "She's trying to help this family. You should be grateful." After that, I learned an important lesson. Keep quiet. Stay small. Survive until I could escape. 2 years after my mom died, my father remarried. Marla seemed kind enough at first. She smiled often, made casseroles, and tried hard to fit into our family. Elise immediately started calling her mom. I always thought that was strategic, a way to lock in her role as the loyal, good daughter. I couldn't do it. I couldn't call a stranger mom when my real mother had been gone for only 2 years. It wasn't about Marla, it was about my heart not being ready. But that quiet refusal came at a cost. From that moment on, Marla treated me like an outsider in my own home. She and Elise formed their own private alliance. And I was never invited in. And I truly wasn't invited. By the time I turned 15, the sides had been clearly chosen. Elise was the golden child, the favorite, the one who could never do anything wrong. I was the problem, the difficult one, the daughter who was always struggling and couldn't seem to fix herself. And then there was the money. Before my mother died, she had created trust funds for both of us, $45,000 each, available when we turned 18. It wasn't a massive fortune, but it mattered. A cushion, a final act of love from a mother who knew she wouldn't be around to help us build our adult lives. Elise turned 18 in 2009 and gained full access to her money. It was gone in less than a year. A flashy sports car, designer clothes, lavish gifts for her boyfriend, Lucas, a smooth-talking man full of grand plans, endless promises, and not a single legitimate source of income. By the time I was thrown out of the house 2 years later, Elise was completely broke. Her trust fund was nothing but a memory, and Lucas was forever chasing his next big opportunity, his next investment idea, the deal that was absolutely going to make them rich. Meanwhile, my $45,000 was still untouched. Locked away until 2014, when I turned 18. Unless something happened to me before then. You see, my mother had included a clause in the trust, something she probably believed would protect us. If either daughter was declared legally incompetent or institutionalized before the age of 21, her share would be placed under the control of a court-appointed family guardian until she recovered. Elise and Lucas understood exactly what that meant. If I were institutionalized for substance abuse, Say, because my father suddenly discovered pills, cash and proof of drug dealing in my room, then someone would need to manage my trust on my behalf. Someone responsible. Someone trustworthy. Someone like a devoted older sister who only wanted what was best for me. $45,000. That was my value to Elise. That was the price she put on her own sister. The week before she destroyed my life, she put her plan into motion. Small cash withdrawals from my father's bank account using his ATM card. She knew his PIN, she handled all the household finances. Empty prescription bottles collected and hidden courtesy of Lucas. A prepaid burner phone bought at a convenience store, filled with fake text messages. On the morning of October 14th, while I was eating breakfast and thinking about my algebra test, Elise slipped into my bedroom. She planted everything. Cash shoved into my dresser drawer. Pill bottles tucked into my closet. A slip of paper with the burner phone number, proof of my contact with a dealer. Then she went to our father with tears in her eyes and told him his youngest daughter was hiding a terrible secret. And he believed her. Why wouldn't he? She had spent 9 years being the perfect daughter, the responsible one, the one who never lied. And I had spent 9 years being quietly turned into the problem, long before I even knew the story was being written. By the time I walked through the front door after school that afternoon, my trial was already over. The judgment had already been passed, and the punishment was exile. That's how I ended up on Route 9 in the middle of an October storm, walking toward my grandmother Evelyn's house as if it were the last light left in the world. But Elise had made one mistake. Just one small flaw in her flawless plan. She hadn't counted on Margaret Lewis. I don't remember much about collapsing, just the sharp sting of gravel scraping into my palms, and then nothing, like someone turned off a television halfway through a show. What I do remember is waking up. Harsh fluorescent lights, the sharp scent of antiseptic mixed with industrial floor cleaner, a thin, scratchy hospital blanket tucked around me carefully as if I were something delicate, something worth protecting. I hadn't felt like that in years. And there was a woman sitting beside my bed. Her silver hair was pulled into a neat bun, reading glasses rested low on her nose, a paperback novel lay closed in her lap. She looked like someone's grandmother, the kind who baked cookies and always carried tissues in her purse. But her eyes were different. Sharp, focused, observing everything. Her name was Margaret Lewis. She was 67 years old, retired after 35 years with Child Protective Services. She had witnessed every form of abuse, every version of neglect, every cruelty adults could justify inflicting on children. And on that cold October night, while driving home from a book club meeting, her headlights caught something along the side of the road. A teenage girl unconscious, soaked through completely alone. She pulled over so fast her tires screamed against the pavement. She kept an emergency blanket in her trunk, an old habit from her CPS days, and she wrapped me up tightly while she called 911. She stayed with me until the ambulance arrived, then she followed it all the way to the hospital. When I woke up 4 hours later, she was still there. That woman didn't just save my life, because she found me before hypothermia finished what the storm had started. She saved me because she was the exact right person at the exact right moment. She handed me a cup of coffee when my eyes opened, hospital cafeteria coffee, the kind that tastes like regret brewed at 200 degrees. "This is awful," she said calmly, "but it's warm." I laughed. Actually laughed. And for the first time in hours, maybe days, she smiled back, a gentle, knowing smile that told me she understood far more than I realized. "There you are," she said softly. "Now tell me why a 15-year-old girl was walking alone on Route 9 in a storm, with no coat and no phone." So I told her. Everything. The accusations. The planted evidence. The years of Elise's manipulation. I told her things I had never said out loud before, because no one had ever truly listened. Margaret didn't interrupt. She didn't question me. She didn't doubt a single word. She just sat there, nodding occasionally, absorbing every detail, And for the first time in a very long time, someone believed me. When I finished speaking, she stayed quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I believe you and I'm going to help you prove it." Those 7 words changed my life. While I'd been unconscious, things were already unfolding. Because a minor had been found in a dangerous situation, the hospital had contacted the police. The police, in turn, tried to reach my next of kin. That meant calling my father. I would have paid good money to see his face when Officer Reynolds delivered the news. From what I was later told, it went something like this. "Mr. Cole, your 15-year-old daughter was found unconscious on Route 9. She reports that you forced her out of your home during a storm this evening. Hypothermia. She's been transporting to County General Hospital. We need you to come in immediately." A pause. "And Sir, Child Protective Services has been notified. A caseworker is already on site. Please bring any evidence you believe is relevant." My father and Elise arrived at the hospital around 10:15 that night. By then I was awake, sitting upright in my hospital bed with Margaret beside me. Also in the room were a CPS caseworker named Angela Ruiz and a uniformed police officer. Not exactly the reunion my father had been expecting. He looked rattled, not guilty, at least not yet, more irritated than anything, like this entire situation was an inconvenience disrupting his evening. Elise stood just behind him, and for the first time in my life she looked nervous. The smug expression she'd worn when I left the house was gone. They had expected to find a frightened, remorseful girl, someone ready to confess, apologize, and beg to be allowed back home. Instead, they walked into a room full of professionals asking very direct questions about why a child had been wandering alone in Severe, whether without a coat, a phone, or any form of protection. The balance of power had shifted, and Elise felt it. She tried to fall back on her usual routine, concerned older sister, troubled younger sibling. "We're just worried about her," she said softly. "We only want what's best." But Angela Ruiz wasn't buying it. 30 years in social work had sharpened her instincts, and Elise was setting off every internal alarm. Then my grandmother arrived. Evelyn Cole was 67 years old, barely 5'2", and made entirely of pure determination. My mother had been her only daughter, I was her only grandchild, and she had never trusted my father or the family he replaced us with. She lived 40 minutes away. She made it in 25. I heard her before I saw her, the sharp, unmistakable click of sensible heels moving fast down the hallway, the kind of sound that meant someone was coming to handle business. She swept into the room like a silver-haired hurricane and immediately placed herself between me and my father. "That's my granddaughter," she announced to everyone present. "What has this idiot done now?" My father started explaining, tried to justify himself, began listing the accusations, the stolen money, the pills, the so-called evidence. Evelyn listened for about 30 seconds. Then she raised one hand. "Victor," she said, her voice sharp and steady, "I've known you for 15 years. You've never been the brightest man in the room, but this might be the most foolish thing you've ever done." She didn't pause. "You threw a child out into a storm based on what exactly? Pills that suddenly appeared, cash that conveniently showed up out of nowhere. Did you even bother asking her what happened?" My father opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came out. Evelyn nodded once. "That's what I thought." That was the thing about my grandmother. She didn't just love me. She fought for me. That night, while I lay exhausted and hypothermic in a hospital bed, Evelyn Cole went to war. She demanded an emergency custody hearing, immediately. It was nearly midnight, and she couldn't have cared less. She called a family court judge who owed her a favor. Apparently, she'd served on the PTA with his wife for over 15 years, and she managed to get him on the phone. The hospital social worker laid out the facts. A minor expelled from her home during dangerous weather. No investigation before the expulsion. No attempt to verify the accusations. Child found unconscious with early-stage hypothermia. The father's evidence never reviewed by any professional. By 12:30 a.m. my life had changed. Emergency temporary guardianship was granted to Evelyn Cole, effective immediately. My father was ordered to have zero contact with me until a full investigation was completed. Child Protective Services would be interviewing everyone, me, Elise, my father, Marla, and they would be taking a very close look at that so-called evidence. As we were leaving the hospital, my father tried one last time. He reached toward me, started to speak. Evelyn stepped between us without even slowing down. "You don't get to touch her," she said calmly. "You don't get to speak to her. You had your chance to be her father and you threw it away, literally, into a storm. Now we're leaving." She guided me out to her old Buick, the same one she'd been driving since before I was born, helped me into the passenger seat and tucked another blanket around me, even though the heater was already blasting warm air. I looked at her, tears pouring down my face. "Grandma, I don't even have clean clothes," I whispered. "I don't have anything." She patted my hand, her eyes both fierce and tender. "Honey, you have me," she said, "and I have a Target card. Tomorrow we shop, tonight you eat soup and sleep in a bed where nobody will ever throw you out." That was the first night of my new life. My grandmother's house had 3 rules. Breakfast at 8. Homework before television. And absolutely no nonsense before her second cup of coffee. It wasn't fancy, it wasn't big, but it was warm, safe, and filled with love. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. But the story wasn't over. Not even close. 2 weeks later, the CPS investigator called my grandmother. "Mrs. Cole," Angela Ruiz said, "you might want to sit down. We've been reviewing the evidence Mr. Cole provided." "The timeline doesn't make sense," she continued. "And we found security footage that tells a very different story." Elise's flawless plan was beginning to crack, and she had no idea what was about to hit her. The investigation changed everything. Angela Ruiz wasn't the kind of CPS caseworker who simply checked boxes and filed paperwork. She was a detective wrapped in a cardigan, and she didn't just review evidence, she followed it. Every receipt, every timestamp, every loose thread. And the more she pulled, the faster Elise's carefully crafted story unraveled. It began with the cash. $800 had been found in my dresser drawer. My father claimed it proved I'd been stealing from him for months. Case closed, right? Except Angela Ruiz actually examined the bank records. That entire $800 came from a single ATM withdrawal made on October 14th, the very day I was thrown out of the house. The bank provided surveillance footage. Timestamp 2:47 p.m. The person on camera wasn't me. It was Elise. Clear as day. She was wearing the same jacket she'd had on that morning. Her hair was pulled back in the same ponytail, and parked behind her was her white sedan, the one with the dented bumper from when she'd backed into a mailbox the previous summer. Here's the thing about alibis. Mine was airtight. At 2:47 p.m. on October 14th, I was sitting in 5th period chemistry class, learning about molecular bonding. The school's attendance system showed me present until 3:15. My teacher specifically remembered me asking a question about covalent electrons. I couldn't have made that withdrawal. It was physically impossible. I was 12 miles away, inside a classroom, surrounded by 30 witnesses and an electronic check-in system. Elise thought she was brilliant. But here's the truth about being a criminal mastermind: you actually have to be smart. She used our father's ATM card without thinking about bank cameras. She made the withdrawal in the middle of the afternoon without checking whether I had an alibi. She bought the burner phone at a convenience store 2 blocks from her gym, on camera, wearing yoga pants, with her car clearly visible in the parking lot. Some masterminds wear disguises. Elise wore designer workout clothes and got caught because she couldn't be bothered to drive 10 extra minutes. Then there were the pills. The bottles planted in my closet were traced back to a prescription belonging to Lucas, Elise's boyfriend, the man with endless big ideas and zero legitimate income. Anxiety medication prescribed by his doctor and filled at the pharmacy on Oak Street. Angela Ruiz called the pharmacy. What she learned was interesting. Lucas had reported those pills stolen. He'd even filed a police report, claiming someone had broken into his car and taken them. Very responsible behavior. Except he filed that report on October 17th, 3 days after I was kicked out. If those pills were already stolen and hidden in my room on October 14th, why wait 3 days to report the theft? The answer was obvious. Because they weren't stolen. Elise gave him the pills to plant, then he reported them missing afterward to cover their tracks and to get a refill. That delayed theft report was like a blinking neon sign that said, "This was planned." And the deeper Angela Ruiz dug, the worse it was about to get. But the real smoking gun was the burner phone. The fake drug dealer messages came from a prepaid phone purchased at a convenience store on October 10th, 4 days before everything fell apart. Angela Ruiz tracked down the store and requested their security footage. The buyer was a young woman, brown hair pulled into a ponytail, athletic build. She paid in cash. And through the store window, her car was clearly visible. A white sedan with a dent in the bumper. Same vehicle. Same woman. Same trail of breadcrumbs leading straight back to Elise. As the investigation widened, something even uglier came into focus. Angela Ruiz began reviewing my family's finances, specifically checks written from my father Victor Cole's account over the previous 2 years. What she found made the $800 look insignificant. Someone had been forging checks in my father's name for nearly 2 years. At first the amounts were small, $50 here, $100 there, nothing that would immediately raise alarms, but over time they added up. The signatures were close, but not quite right. And the money didn't disappear randomly. It was deposited into accounts connected to Lucas and his so-called business ventures. The total amount taken came to just under $18,000. Elise hadn't only framed me. She had been quietly draining our father's money for years, and she needed me out of the picture before anyone started asking questions. My grandmother, Evelyn Cole, had absolutely no intention of letting that go. She hired Leonard Vance, an old family friend who had practiced family law for over 30 years. He had known my mother Lillian since grade school. When Evelyn explained what had happened, his expression hardened in a way that made me grateful he was on my side. Leonard immediately filed for permanent guardianship. He also filed a civil lawsuit against Elise for fraud, emotional distress, and every other charge he could reasonably pursue. And he made sure my trust fund was locked down with additional court oversight, so no one could touch it until I turned 18. That year taught me something I still live by. Document everything. Every receipt. Every message. Every promise someone makes, write it down. My grandmother kept a folder for every important paper in her life. Bills, letters, tax records, warranties. She called it her paper insurance. After everything that happened, I started doing the same. At 16 years old, I bought my first filing cabinet. I still have it. I still use it. Some habits can save your life. Living with Grandma Evelyn felt like learning how to breathe again after years of holding my lungs tight. Her house wasn't large or impressive, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that always smelled like coffee and cinnamon. But it was warm. It was safe. And no one there was plotting against me. She enrolled me in a new school where nobody knew my past. I made real friends for the first time, people who liked me for who I actually was, not for the version of me they'd been warned about. I started seeing a counselor, finally untangling years of manipulation I hadn't even realized I'd absorbed. Evelyn didn't have many rules. But she was firm about one thing. Dinner was at 6. No exceptions. She always said chaos could wait until after the meatloaf. Honestly, it's still some of the best advice I've ever received. While my life was slowly stabilizing, my father's world was unraveling. The CPS investigation placed the entire Cole household under a microscope. Victor was questioned again and again, each interview leaving him more drained, more disoriented. How had he missed so much? How had he been so blind? Marla started sleeping in the guest room. Conversations between them turned short and sharp, thick with unspoken blame neither of them wanted to say out loud. And Elise was furious. Not remorseful, never remorseful. Just angry that her plan had collapsed. She blamed everyone but herself. The CPS investigator was biased. The bank footage was misleading. Lucas's prescription records were a misunderstanding. The crown of the golden child was slipping, and she couldn't stand it. Leonard Vance spent months assembling a case so tight it left no room to breathe. Bank records, surveillance footage, pharmacy logs, phone purchase receipts. He gathered statements from Margaret Lewis, from my teachers, from neighbours who had noticed Elise's car coming and going at strange hours. Even some of Elise's former friends came forward. It turned out she burned more bridges than anyone realised. People were surprisingly eager to talk about her lies, her manipulation, and the casual cruelty she'd shown over the years. The court date was set for March 2012. But a month before the hearing, something no one expected happened. Lucas was arrested in Nevada. Federal marshals picked him up for running the same investment scam across 3 different states. More than $400,000 stolen from people who trusted him with their life savings. He was facing serious federal charges, possibly up to 15 years in prison. The very next day, his lawyer made a call. Lucas was ready to cooperate, ready to negotiate, ready to tell the truth about everything, including Elise and what she had done to her little sister. The walls were closing in, and Elise had nowhere left to run. Lucas was many things. A con artist, a liar, a man who built his entire life on other people's trust and money. But he was not loyal. The moment federal prosecutors offered a reduced sentence in exchange for cooperation, he talked extensively. His written statement ran 12 pages long. He confirmed everything. The plan to frame me had been Elise's idea from the start. She had been stealing from our father for nearly 2 years, funneling the money directly into Lucas's so-called investments. When she realized the theft was becoming harder to hide, she decided she needed someone to take the fall. She needed a scapegoat. That scapegoat was me. I was perfect for the role. The troubled younger sister. The outsider. The one who never quite fit. The one no one would believe. She told Lucas that having me institutionalized would solve 2 problems at once. She'd have someone to blame for the missing money, and she'd gain access to my trust fund as my legal guardian. $45,000. That's what she planned to take from me while I sat in some facility, medicated, discredited, and completely alone. Lucas wrote everything down. The planning sessions, the pill bottles he supplied, the burner phone Elise bought, the morning she slipped into my room and planted the evidence. He even included text messages between them from the days leading up to October 14th, messages that proved this wasn't impulsive. It was calculated, premeditated, cold. One line from his statement stayed with me. Karen said her sister was a nobody who wouldn't fight back. She was wrong. March 2012. Family court. I'd been living with Grandma Evelyn for 5 months by then. I'd gained weight, the good kind, the kind that comes from regular meals and real sleep. I'd made the honor roll at my new school. I'd started remembering what it felt like to be a normal teenager. But walking into that courtroom, I felt 15 again. Small, scared, wondering if anyone would believe me. Evelyn squeezed my hand. Leonard Vance gave me a reassuring nod. And Margaret Lewis was there too, sitting quietly in the gallery. Wearing the same reading glasses and the same fierce expression she'd had the night she found me on the roadside. The hearing was supposed to be straightforward. Make Evelyn's temporary guardianship permanent. Establish support obligations. Tie up loose ends. Instead, it became something much larger. The district attorney had stepped in. With Lucas's confession and the mountain of evidence Angela Ruiz had compiled, This was no longer just a family court issue. Criminal charges were on the table. Elise sat across the courtroom with a public defender she'd met barely an hour earlier. She looked smaller than I remembered, paler. The confident golden child who had ruled our household for years now looked exactly like what she was. A frightened young woman whose lies had finally caught up with her. Our father sat alone in the gallery. Marla hadn't come. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in 5 months. The evidence was presented carefully, methodically, relentlessly. ATM footage showing Elise making the withdrawal at 2:47 p.m. My school attendance records proving I was in chemistry class at that exact moment. Pharmacy records revealing Lucas's conveniently delayed theft report. Security footage from the convenience store capturing Elise purchasing the burner phone. 2 years of forged checks totaling $18,000. And finally, Lucas's confession. Read into the record word for word. When it was Elise's turn to testify, she tried to hold on to her story. She acted confused, innocent, deeply concerned about her troubled younger sister. But the room had changed, and everyone could feel it. The prosecutor wasn't having it. "M. Cole," she said, holding up the ATM photo. "Is this you at First National Bank on October 14th at 2:47 p.m. Elise swallowed hard. She stared at the image of herself crystal clear. I was getting money for groceries," she stammered. "Groceries?" The prosecutor nodded slowly. $800 in cash for groceries. "And you didn't mention this withdrawal to your father when you accused your sister of stealing that exact amount later the same day?" Silence. "And the location of this ATM, 12 miles from your sister's school, a school where attendance records show she was present until 3:15 p.m. Can you explain how she could have made this withdrawal while sitting in chemistry class?" More silence. Elise's public defender objected, but there was nothing to argue. Evidence doesn't care about feelings. Facts speak for themselves. Next, they called Marla. She looked like she wanted to be anywhere else on earth. Years of staying quiet, staying neutral, not getting involved, none of it mattered here. This was a courtroom. She was under oath. Staying silent wasn't an option. The prosecutor asked about the morning of October 14th. "Did you notice anything unusual?" Marla's voice was barely above a whisper. Elise went into Sherry's room that morning around 7:00 a.m. She said she was borrowing a hair tie. "Did she come out with a hair tie?" "No, she came out empty-handed." "And did you notice anything else in the days before the incident?" Marla closed her eyes, bracing herself. 2 days before, I overheard Elise on the phone with Lucas. She said everything is in place, and then she laughed. The courtroom went completely silent. When they called Victor to the stand, I almost felt a flicker of pity, almost. He had to explain why he had expelled his 15-year-old daughter into a storm without investigating the accusations against her. Had to admit he'd never checked the bank records himself, never questioned why Elise suddenly discovered this evidence, never asked for my side of the story. His voice cracked. I trusted her. She's my firstborn. She was always the responsible one." And then he couldn't finish. Judge Patricia Morrison had been on the bench for 30 years. She'd seen ugly custody battles, bitter divorces, families torn apart by lies, money, and pride. But even she looked unsettled. Her words cut through the courtroom like a blade. "Mr. Cole, trust is not an excuse for negligence. You expelled a minor child into dangerous weather based on unverified accusations. You made no attempt to investigate. You chose one daughter over another without evidence, without reason, without basic parental judgment. That is not parenting. That is abandonment." My father sat there, grey-faced, as she continued. "Your older daughter engaged in a calculated, premeditated scheme to ruin her sister's life," the judge said. "She stole from you, lied to you, and manipulated you into enabling her cruelty. And you allowed it, because it was easier to believe the daughter who made you feel good than to actually parent the daughter who needed you." Elise's sentence was severe. Fraud, theft, filing false statements to law enforcement, child endangerment. Her public defender negotiated a plea deal to avoid a full trial. 2-year suspended sentence. She wouldn't go to prison unless she violated probation. 5 years of supervised probation. 200 hours of community service. Full restitution of all stolen funds. $18,000 from our father plus the $800 she had planted to frame me. The court also issued a permanent restraining order. Elise was forbidden from contacting me in any way. Any attempt to come within 500 feet of me would send her straight to jail. And here was the part that would follow her forever, a felony conviction permanently on her record, no jobs in finance, no positions involving money or trust, no work with children or vulnerable adults. The golden child now bore a scarlet letter, and it would never come off. My father lost all guardianship rights permanently. He was ordered to cover my therapy and educational expenses until I turned 21. He was also required to set up a college fund using the restitution money. Word spread quickly, small towns talk. Within weeks everyone knew what Victor Cole had done to his younger daughter. Friends stopped calling, neighbors looked away. His church group suddenly discovered scheduling conflicts whenever he tried to attend. Marla filed for divorce 6 weeks later. She'd been complicit in my suffering and couldn't bear to be reminded of it every time she looked at her husband. At the end, the judge turned to me. "Miss Cole," she said, "you've shown remarkable resilience in the face of extraordinary cruelty. This court grants full permanent custody to your grandmother, Evelyn Cole. Your trust fund will remain protected until you reach 18, and I sincerely hope your future is brighter than your past." I wanted to say something clever, something memorable. "Your Honor, you should see me parallel park. That's the real test of character. But some jokes are just for yourself." Instead, I simply said, "Thank you." As we left the courthouse, my father tried one last time to reach me. "Sweetheart," he started. I didn't hear more. Grandma Evelyn stepped between us without breaking stride. Her voice was ice. "You don't get to call her that anymore. You lost that right when you threw her into a storm." We kept walking. I didn't turn around. The sun was out that day. March can be unpredictable where we're from, but that afternoon was warm, bright in a way that felt intentional, like the world was offering reassurance. I had a grandmother who chose me, a lawyer who fought like blood mattered, a caseworker and a retired CPS supervisor who believed me when disbelief had been easier. For the first time, I had a future that belonged to me. But some stories don't end in courtrooms. Some wait. Some circle back. 13 years later, the past knocked again. October 2024. I'm 28 now, and my life looks nothing like it did at 15, walking through a storm with nothing but a school backpack and soaked sneakers. I live in Boston, a bright apartment overlooking the harbor, morning light pouring through tall windows. I chose myself finally. I'm a marketing director at a tech company. Good pay, good benefits, better people. I started as an intern, and every promotion felt like another mile between who I was and who I became. And I'm engaged. His name is Colin. He's a pediatric nurse, which tells you almost everything you need to know about his heart. We met at a charity event 2 years ago, me for work, him because he genuinely cared. He spilled wine on my dress, apologized for 10 straight minutes, then made me laugh so hard I forgot to be irritated. We're getting married in the spring. Life is good. Really good. The kind of good I once thought belonged to other people. Then the letter came. It was sent to my grandmother's house. Evelyn still lives there. Same place, same strength at 80, same 3 rules, breakfast at 8, responsibilities before television and no nonsense before coffee. She called me and said something had arrived that I needed to see. Her tone was careful, neutral, the voice she uses when she refuses to steer my choices. I drove down that weekend. The envelope was plain, cheap paper, handwriting so shaky it took a second to recognize it. The return address read Maple Grove Care Center, a nursing home about an hour from where I grew up. I opened it at Evelyn's kitchen table, my coffee untouched and cooling between my hands. "Dear Miss Cole, I know I don't deserve to ask anything of you. I know you have every reason to throw this letter away unread, but I'm writing anyway because I don't have much time left, and there are things I need to say before I'm gone. I'm at Maple Grove now. I had a stroke 2 years ago. The left side doesn't work the way it used to. Marla is long gone, took half of everything and moved to Florida with some accountant she met online. The house is sold. The life I thought I had is gone with it. Elise came to see me last week. I wouldn't let her in. I can't look at her. I can't hear her voice without remembering what I did because I believed her lies. You're the only one I want to see, the only one I need to apologize to. I was your father and I failed you in the worst way a parent can fail a child. I chose comfort over truth, lies over evidence. I threw you away like you were nothing. My hands were shaking by the time I reached the bottom of the page. The letter wasn't finished. I know you owe me nothing, but if you can find it in your heart to come, just once, I would like the chance to say I'm sorry to your face before it's too late. Your father, Raymond. I sat there for a long time after finishing the letter. The coffee went cold. The afternoon light slid slowly across the kitchen table. Evelyn didn't speak. She never rushed moments like this. She waited the way she always had, trusting me to decide when I was ready. 13 years of silence. 13 years of building a life without him. Did I owe him anything? No, absolutely not. But I thought about my mother. About the woman who raised me for 10 years before cancer took her. About the values she'd planted in me, kindness without weakness, strength without cruelty. I thought about ending cycles instead of carrying them forward. So I decided to go. Not for him. For myself. The nursing home was exactly what you'd imagine. Harsh fluorescent lights, shiny industrial floors, that sharp disinfectant smell desperately trying to mask the quiet scent of endings. My father's room was small, one narrow bed, a single window, a television mounted on the wall playing something no one was watching. He looked decades older than his age, 73 on paper but closer to 90 in reality. The stroke had hollowed him out, left him grey, folded inward, diminished in a way I'd never seen before. He cried when I walked in. Not quietly, not politely. He broke, couldn't speak at first, just sat there with tears running down his face while I stood near the door wondering if I'd made a mistake. Eventually he found his voice. He apologized again and again, stumbling over words, repeating himself. The stroke had taken part of his language too. He said he'd been blind, foolish, cruel. He said losing me was the worst thing he'd ever done, that he thought about that October night every single day, every storm, every rainfall. I let him finish. I didn't interrupt. I didn't comfort him. Then I said what I had come to say. I forgive you. His face collapsed with relief, but I wasn't done. But I need you to understand what that means. I pulled a chair closer and sat where he could see me clearly. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means I'm choosing not to carry this anger anymore. It's heavy, and I'm done letting it live inside me. You threw me into a storm because you believed a lie, not because the evidence was convincing, but because it was easier, because Elise made you feel good about yourself, and I reminded you of everything you lost when Mom died. You chose comfort over your own child. I built my entire life without you. I put myself through college. I built a career. I'm marrying a man who would never throw me out, not in a drizzle, not in a hurricane. I'm happy now. But what you did, that's something you have to live with. It's not my burden anymore, it's yours. He nodded, tears still falling. I know, he whispered. I know, I just needed you to know I'm sorry. I needed to see you once more. I stayed another 20 minutes. We didn't say much. There wasn't anything left that mattered. I told him safe things, about my job, my apartment, Colin. He listened like every word was sacred. When I stood to leave, he reached out with his good hand, not grabbing, just reaching. I let him touch my fingers for a moment. Then I walked out. In the hallway, a nurse stopped me. You're his daughter, right? The younger one. I nodded. She glanced back toward his room, then looked at me again. Your sister came by last week. He refused to see her. Told the staff to send her away. I stood very still. He wouldn't look at her. The nurse shook her head. She said he could only manage an apology to one daughter, and it wasn't her. He got upset about it, actually. Said he couldn't bear seeing her face without remembering what she had done. I didn't know what to say. After all those years of being the rejected one, the discarded child, the one who wasn't enough, my father had finally turned away from Elise, the golden child, the daughter he had trusted without question. Too late to change anything, too late to heal the past. But still, something shifted in my chest. Not forgiveness, I'd already given that. Something quieter, something like closure, the last page of a very long story finally turning. I walked out of that nursing home into bright October sunlight. Same month, different weather, different life. 13 years ago, October meant cold rain, betrayal, and hypothermia. Now October meant falling leaves, pumpkin spice, and beginnings. Yes, I was basic, I didn't care. This was also the anniversary of my real life starting. Some storms don't destroy you, they redirect you. That night 13 years ago I lost a home, but I found one that mattered. I lost a father who didn't deserve me, but I found a grandmother who did. I lost a sister who never truly loved me, but I found myself. Colin was waiting when I returned to Boston. Take-out containers on the counter. A bad movie paused on the TV. That patient look he gets when he knows I need space to process. "How'd it go?" he asked. I dropped my keys on the table and leaned against him. "I think I'm finally done," I said. "I think I can let it go now." He wrapped his arms around me. No questions asked, no lectures, just presence. That's Colin. He knows when to push and when to simply be. One of 1,000 reasons I'm marrying him. Next spring, the wedding will be at my grandmother's house. Small, intimate, close friends, good food. Evelyn is already planning the menu. Meatloaf will definitely be on the list. Somewhere out there, Elise is working night shifts, wondering where her life went off course. My father sits alone in a nursing home, left with only regrets. Marla is in Florida, pretending none of us ever existed. But me, I'm in Boston. I have a career I built from scratch. A partner who loves me. A grandmother who will probably outlive us all through sheer stubbornness. And yes, I finally got that band poster framed properly. The one I bought with my allowance the week everything fell apart. I tracked down the same one years later, paid way too much for it, and hung it in my office so I can see it every day. Some things are worth waiting for. Justice after dark. The story ends here.